Hey guys, what's up? I'm super excited for you to be listening in today. I am with Jessi from Real Life on a Budget blog and Jessi Fearon. Is that how you say your last name?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. Nailed it. JessiFearon.com. And what I am really interested about right now, Jessi, is because like you have at the time that we're recording this, you have come into my life, my personal life, at a really good time because we have gotten to this place, my husband and I, where we are like, okay, this budget thing that we think we have mastered in our heads of how much is in the bank and what do we have going out is no longer working. And as I've been reading your blog and looking through, your Facebook page and stuff like that, like you are the person that I probably need to be talking to right now.
Well,
So,
you are way too kind to me, darling.
so before we get started, I want to let you introduce yourself to the audience, kind of let everybody know a little bit about who you are, what life kind of looks like right now for you, and just a little gist of that sort of thing.
Well, I'm Jessi, and I'm a financial coach, and I am a mom of three kids. I've been married for 9 years, and my husband and I, we got ourselves into a little bit of financial trouble. We sunk ourselves into over $55,000 of consumer debt, so that wasn't even including the mortgage.
Right.
And I was a stay-at-home mom. We already had one kid, and we were pregnant with the next one. I literally started 2012 pregnant and ended it pregnant. Um, so we kind of found ourselves in a bit of a mess come like the beginning of 2013 when I started realizing that there was literally no way that we were going to be able to afford for me to continue staying home with our kids. But we also weren't really going to be able to afford for me to go back to work just
Yeah.
because the fact that it was like I was going to take like the beginner salary type
Hmm.
jobs, and so most of it was going to go towards daycare anyways and
Yep.
gas in the car. So it was like, what do we do here? Because it's kind of like we're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
And so we started, kind of like doing a lot more research, and um, I came across the book called The Total Money Makeover. I read it, and I started talking to my husband about us completely paying off our debt. And at first, he was really on board because of like credit card debt is always seen as like
Yeah.
bad debt.
Right.
So he was like, okay, yeah, we could totally get rid of the credit cards because at the time we just both only had like one apiece, so there was only two in the household.
Yeah.
Um, so those were definitely the easier debts to pay off. I won't say it was easy, but they were easier than the other
Right.
debts that we had. And so he was totally on board with that, and he was on board with also getting rid of my really nice car that I had.
Of
My
course.
dream car has always been a Tahoe. Exactly, it's always been a Tahoe, and it was like a fully loaded. It wasn't brand new when we bought it, but it was very nice. It was fully
Hmm.
loaded, with the built-in navigation and the wood grain interior and all these really awesome things. But it also came with like a really heavy price tag with that. And my husband was like, okay, sure, we can get rid of that, like whatever, like we can do that. But he didn't really like the saving up to go pay cash for a car
Yeah.
part. That was the part that he kind of was having a little bit of a hard time with because we were having to, really scrimp by in order to save up the cash to be able to go and buy my paid for Sequoia and get rid of the Tahoe in the process. And then, of course, paying off my student loans was the next big thing. And we kind of had to have these talks because a lot of people were like, well, why are you going to do that? Because you can write it off on your taxes and
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but my student loans are so expensive. So it
Yes.
took us a little bit, but we managed to pay everything off in just over 2 years. We were able to pay it off right before the birth of our third child.
That's
So
awesome.
that was, yeah, it's quite the feat for us for sure. And we now almost have our house paid off. We owe just right at $14,000 on our mortgage, and our goal is to have it paid off by December of next year. So fingers crossed that we make that.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I would love to hear the update on that. So how did you guys even know where to start? Because I think that a lot of people can relate to, especially when you said you were in a place where you guys needed to do something financially, but it didn't make sense for you to go back to work. Like I feel like I've heard this like same scenario over and over again because childcare is so expensive,
Yes,
and then you add on
yes.
gas and the driving to and the from, and then parents are just in this hard place of where do I start? So how did you guys even come up with this idea to start this budget or what these tools or these steps that you guys are using? Like how did you know?
Well, it came down to that I was trying to figure out because my husband, he worked for a company at the time, but he was like a 1099 employee, so he's like a contractor.
Uh-huh.
So we had a private insurance policy, and this happened right after the time that my husband actually fell out of a two-story window.
Oh,
And
perfect timing.
yeah, I know, right? And like we had literally wiped out our savings because it
Yeah.
was a whole big debacle with his boss. Like they didn't have workman's comp, and
Oh
in
my goodness.
tax wise, he was actually supposed to be an employee, not a contract. It was like a whole big debacle that just kind of blew up. But at the same time, my husband needed surgery, or else he was going to lose functionality in his arm because he had
Oh,
shattered his wrist.
oh my goodness.
Which thank God that was the worst part of him falling out of the
Right.
window.
Well, yeah.
um, so, but the problem was like we had no savings now. Here we are having another kid, and I'm like trying to figure out, okay, how can we do all these things? How can we save up more money? Because before we had our first child, while I was pregnant with him, we started taking my paychecks and just putting them into savings, which is why we had such a good, cushion in the
Mm-hmm.
bank. But then all that was gone. So it
Mm.
was like that safety net was removed. And I think it made us both very nervous and very aware of the fact that we needed to do something. And so when I started really looking at the numbers and realizing that once our second child came along, I was like, there's no way. There's no way that we're going to be able to save up money, that we're going to be prepared if another catastrophe hits. Like
Yeah.
we're just not. We're not going to be prepared at all. And so, and once I read the Total Money Makeover, and I was like, okay, like I'm starting to buy into this, that there isn't a good debt or a bad debt, and I really do believe that we need to rethink that and just see all debt as debt, because that's what it is. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you choose to use debt or not, you just need to see it as what it is. You owe somebody money. It's not really good or bad. You just have to pay that back.
Right.
And so once we started having these conversations about it, we were like, okay, well, let's start doing this. Let's start doing this. So we made a plan. Our big goal was to have the credit cards paid off before our second child was born, which we did. It was quite a hustle. My credit card only had like $450 on it. So we kind of tightened down our bootstraps for like a month, and we were able to pay that one off like very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that my husband was using had right over $3,000 on it. So it took us a much longer time to be able to do that because we were still trying to put money into savings and prepare for the birth of our next kid. So it was really, really challenging, but it was also amazing that once we paid off the two credit cards, we felt like we could breathe a little bit. There was a little
Yeah.
room in the budget, and we're like, okay, this feels good. This feels nice. And then once we finally got rid of the Tahoe, like we literally gave ourselves a $450 raise. Like that,
Yeah.
like literally every month the $450 of it was going to pay for the Tahoe, and now we didn't have that no more. And so it was just amazing that we like really truly had these this more margin in our budget, and we were able to start using our money just in a better, more proactive way. We were able to save more, and we were of course paying off my student loans, but we didn't have quite as much of this kind of cloud hanging over us, if you will. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't okay, like all it's going to take is one little, bump, and then we're just like everything's falling apart type of thing. We no longer felt that way anymore.
Yeah. It's super stressful. Um, I know that along with the Total Money Makeover, a big part of this system is using cash envelopes. Did you guys implement that? And if you did, was it hard to transition that way? I just feel like I don't know. It's so, we get so used to just swiping. And my husband and I were talking about this just last night or the night before about how it's so easy to just swipe because you don't see
Yes.
anything coming out and you just assume that money is there, but you don't actually think about the monetary like value of what you're swiping for or what's coming. Like there's no logical math equation going on in your brain as you're doing the swipe. You're just like, I'm going to swipe and it's paid for and
Yep.
I'm done, and you walk away. And then you have that, like you said, that cloud because it's the stress of, hey, like, here it comes. Like, it's this bill that you have to pay along with all these other surprise bills or surprise expenses. And you're just like, oh my gosh, where did all that money go? Um, so do you guys implement the cash envelopes, and how was that for you and your husband if you did transition to that?
We did. My husband, he has a much harder time if he has cash on hand. Like even just recently, he was saving up cash to go buy a new boat motor in cash,
Hmm.
but he had to have me hide it from him because he would just go pick like $10 or something like that. Like he's really bad with cash, and we
Yeah.
figured that out really quickly when we were trying to do the cash envelope system. It wasn't working.
You're like, oh wait,
So
maybe we'll take your envelopes back now.
yeah, so we actually share a debit card, which is so funny because it's like has my name on it, but my husband will use it. So it's just really funny. But we share a debit card. But so he'll like a lot of times I just let him use that, and I usually will use the cash, especially when we were starting out. Like now, I don't necessarily buy our groceries with cash all the time anymore. Only whenever I feel like I need to kind of control myself if I'm going a little too insane.
Yeah.
Just because I'm more into like the budget. I'm more into like managing it and
Yeah.
going back and adjusting it. Whereas when we were first starting out, that wasn't second nature to me. So
Yeah.
I was having to, kind of force myself to do it because I
Mm.
mean, the truth is that if I was at the grocery store and I had only budgeted, say, $100 for our groceries,
Right.
and but I had my debit card with me and the total was like $103, well, I'm just going to swipe that debit card and keep on moving on.
Right.
But then I'm not going to go home and readjust that $3. And even if it is only $3, it might not seem like a big deal. But if you've done a zero balance budget, which basically means that your income minus expenses equals zero, like there's no difference, you have now just given yourself a negative balance in your budget
Yeah.
if you don't go back and readjust it. And cash kind of prevents that from happening because if you just have a $100 bill on you, you can't spend that $3. It's literally a boundary for your money, and that was super helpful for me. And it was super helpful for my husband too. He just had a much harder time because it would like burn a hole in his pocket.
Yeah.
So he doesn't always have the debit card with him if he needed it and then give it back to me. And so then he would go days without having the debit card. So he wasn't always like spending money every single day because his big pitfall was always Red Bulls.
Yeah.
Like we used to get into these like ridiculous arguments over a $2 can. Him it was just $2, but I'm like, yeah, but it's $2 over like an entire month. Like it's like $60. Like, dude, stop. So it took a little while for us to get on board and get used to it. But I mean, it took a lot of communicating and going back to the drawing board, so to speak, kind of like adjusting, okay, well, this isn't working. How can we fix this? And also giving things time to work. Like I didn't like when we started with the cash thing, it was a little bit of a hassle. And a part of me wanted to give up on it because I didn't like going to the bank to get the cash out and then
Right.
dividing it up. I really did not like doing that. But once I gave it some time, I started to realize, okay, this is getting easier and easier to stick to the budget. And so, like I said, now I don't have to do that so much anymore just because it is second nature.
Mm-hmm.
But back then it wasn't. So I had to train myself for that. Like I actually just this past weekend was in Pensacola, Florida for a really good friend of ours for her bachelorette party. And I actually just took cash with me. And everybody down there was like, oh, you just brought cash? That's it? You didn't bring like a card or anything? I said, no, because I have a limit and I don't want to I don't want to allow myself to just go completely crazy, but I had my parameters to work within. And that was actually a blessing to me because it kept me from like stressing. I'm like, am I spending too much? Am I doing too much? Like I
Yeah.
was able to keep myself in check instead of getting like super excited because I'm at the beach and I don't have kids with me and yay, kind of kept myself in check. And so it can be really good for those types of things. But some people, it doesn't work for like my husband, like I said, it didn't work for him, but I do think giving it a go, giving it a real honest go, I should say,
Right.
is very helpful. It does teach you a lot about it. And if you can train yourself to be aware of what you're spending on your debit card, then you'll probably be fine without having to do the envelope system.
Yeah. So you are a family of 5, and this, I think for me already, as we're going into this, because we've been looking at the total money makeover. Actually, that's what we plan on implementing. And I feel like for a lot of moms, they're very protective over their grocery budget, and then, so I'm like, how do so many women do that? Like, how do they budget for these? Like when you have big families, and this is the reality, is that like you eat a lot of food and food's expensive, and I just like looking at the numbers, my mind is just blown. So how do you, with a large family, because you're a family of 5, how do you
Yes.
manage a grocery budget that is realistic?
Well, I'll tell you that Aldi is amazing. So if
Yeah.
you have an Aldi near you, definitely check out Aldi. But that's actually where I started doing the majority of my shopping because I used to do a lot of couponing,
Mhm.
but the problem was is that I was buying a lot of junk food with
Mm.
the coupons, and I
Because you
also
think
was
it's a
buying
good deal, right?
yeah, and I was also buying stuff that we weren't really necessarily wanting to eat, if that makes sense. Like I'd be like, "Oh my God, it's such a good, sale price, and plus I got a coupon," and I would just go buy it. And so that wasn't very helpful. And so I had to become very realistic. Like one of the things that I do is that I have cookbooks that I use. Like that's what I use the majority of my meal planning with, and I also have what I call my family favorites binder, which is literally a binder that I keep in my pantry that has just like what our family's like favorite recipes. And at the very
Mm.
front, I just literally have a page that I typed out with like the ingredients. So then that way, sometimes I can be like, hey, I'm not really feeling like doing anything creative this week, or we have a busy week, so I don't want to do anything too crazy and my kids not like it or whatever.
Right.
I can go to that binder and see, okay, well, you know what? All these meals we like already. So, okay, I only need to get, XYZ off this ingredient list and I can make any of these meals for the entire week.
Mm.
And so that is really, really helpful for us. And again, using cookbooks has been very helpful because it keeps me off Pinterest and wanting to,
Yeah.
shop all the, Joanna Gaines home decor and everything else that's on there. And so I do a lot of that around my meal planning. And I kind of just try to take into account, what our week is going to look like if I need to have slow cooker meals or, easy meals
Mm.
or what have you. That is easy. Another thing is that I only let my kids snack once a day, and that is it, which is very difficult to implement. But that has been really helpful with
Yeah.
our grocery budget because with two boys, I swear, could
Oh,
eat me
yeah.
out of house and home, and they're not even teenagers yet. So I'm a
Right.
little frightened of when they become teenagers. But we've had to kind of work at getting them on like one snack a day schedule, and it's a big snack, but just allowing them to only have that one snack a day has been very, very helpful for it as well. And just kind of keeping up with like the things that they like and the things that they don't like, but also making sure that they actually eat their dinner. And by them having that one snack a day, they usually end up eating their dinner because they're actually hungry at dinner time instead
Yeah.
of,
Bored
not being
snacking.
hungry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that has been very beneficial to us as far as that goes. And, I mean, obviously the tips of, trying to buy your meat in bulk and all of those types of things are very, very helpful. And I always will try to plan where at least one of my shopping trips in the month is like kind of a bulk up, shopping
Mhm.
trip where I'm going to spend a little bit more than I normally would because I'm going to buy maybe some, canned goods or some dry goods or, meat or whatever might be on sale
Mhm.
that week that I'm like, okay, we need to bulk up on some of this stuff. I try to do that as well. And that
So
has been very, very helpful.
so what do you think about places like Costco? Cuz I've always thought I always feel like we spend more in there than we would had I not like had a membership at all, but then I also feel like some of the stuff that we would buy anyways is cheaper there. So I know a lot of people struggle with, especially if they're being conscious of their budget, if these memberships are actually worth implementing into.
It's so funny that you say that because we were actually talking about this over the weekend. Me and some of my friends were because they just put a Costco by us,
Ah,
and so they're all really excited about it. And I was like, well, I don't really know how I feel about it yet. So I'm hoping that one of them will let me go with their membership so I can go and see. Because
yeah.
I'm like, I don't really know. Because I know that in the past, we had a BJ's membership, and I honestly would spend so much more money in
Mhm.
BJ's buying all this stuff. And I mean, we don't eat like, we don't need like 20 things of macaroni and cheese
Right.
or what have you. Like, we don't need all of that. And so it was like, it kind of felt like it wasn't worth it. So now I'm wondering if maybe because my kids are a little bit older, maybe it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
So I can't really say for certain how I feel about it yet, but I will say that, if you can get somebody who has like a membership and that lets you borrow it for free so you can go and check it out, like I think it's absolutely worth doing that if you're paying attention to your grocery budget to find out if it will be cheaper for you or not.
Yeah. So I feel like most of this is going to be a trial and error thing and that
Yes.
you can't like stick to. I know that the book will give you like guidelines, but I also feel probably like with anything else, if we are so strict to these guidelines and they don't match our family or they're stressing us out, that there is some, well, I mean, you have to keep it in within limits, but there is some wiggle room. Like we just need to make it work for our family because our
Yes.
family doesn't look like your family or somebody, our neighbor's family or, um, so I wanted to ask your opinion on what are the common top mistakes that couples make that really negatively impact their finances that they maybe don't even realize that they're doing?
Well, first would be not talking about it at all. So
Oh.
whether some like, because I know for me, like one of my big mistakes is that like when I make a mistake in the budget, I always don't want to tell my husband. Like that's my default. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I made a mistake. I'm the one with the accounting degree here. Like I shouldn't be making mistakes, right? Like that's where I kind of default.
Mhm.
And but that's not right. Like I shouldn't be that way. And I had to open up and be honest with my husband and tell him I made a mistake so we can work through it. And so I think that that's kind of the first step, like, or the first mistake that a lot of couples make is that they're not willing to talk about, anything that's gone wrong or in a non-combative way,
Right.
like in like, okay, well, here's where we went over this month. Like, how do we fix this? That's like actually exactly what my husband and I would say to each other is that we went over. How do we fix this instead of, well, you spent too much on this or you
Yeah.
did this instead of like playing the blame game. It's on both of us to figure it out. So that would be my first advice. But the other mistake that I see that happens is that people, like any financial guru's advice, like they'll find it, they love it, and they're like, oh my God, we have to follow it exactly this way. If we don't follow it exactly this way, we've done something wrong.
Right.
But that's not the case. I mean, yes, money works, the same way. You got income minus expenses equals your difference. You either have enough income or you don't, period, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is that to think that, okay, if this like beautiful formula, it works perfectly for this family, and then we think that we can just make it work for our family and we don't take into account the fact that we are different than that family, then it's never going to work. We have different priorities, and I'm all about, trying to budget in what those priorities are. Like some families, their priorities is in fact paying for private school, where maybe for another family it's not.
Yeah.
So maybe that family that's paying for the private school decides, okay, well, we're just not going to, we're not going to go out to eat as much, or we're not going to be, maybe doing extracurricular activities or whatever, but that's their decision. And if you're conscious
Yeah.
of your money and conscious of your budget, you will be able to make those decisions that go in line with the priorities that your family has instead of trying to base it off of the priorities of another family.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, for everybody listening who is like, yes, I need this in my life. I need to figure out something because it's not working. Because I feel like we're just in that place. Just, I mean, because of the credit card craze, like we all, have them and we don't think about it, and then we get in these holes, and then. Either we were raised to think that, debt isn't debt, like it's just monthly payments that are naturally a part of life. Or
Yeah.
like we just have so many different backgrounds. But if we're listening and we want to make a change in our budget, what would you say would be the first step for a family to get out of that vicious cycle that they've been in, and having bills piled up and debt, from ear to ear or whatever? What would you say that their first step needs to be?
Definitely the first step is listing out your budgets or your budgets. I'm sorry, listing out your debts in order of from the smallest balance to the largest one,
Hmm.
and looking and just kind of looking at them, like staring them in the face, because I kind of feel like sometimes like we know we have debt and we might know that we have a lot of debt, but we don't actually know what the numbers are. So it
Yeah.
just kind of hangs out somewhere off to the side. But when we put it down on paper, it's like it can't hurt us no more because now we can make a plan and we can figure out where to go from there.
Mm.
And so once you've made that list, then, if you haven't already made a budget, make a budget and start figuring out where can we find extra room to start aggressively attacking this list of debts.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of what's called the debt snowball method, which is where you pay the smallest balance debt first and then snowball that payment on down the line until you finally pay off that last big debt.
Hmm.
Because that's what we did, and it worked really, really well. It kept us motivated. Because I can tell you that if we had started with my $30,000 student loans, we would have quit. We would have
Oh
never
yeah,
done it. Yeah,
because you can
there would
never
have been
get to
no
the
point.
end. Yeah, you're like, when am I
Exactly.
ever gonna get there? That
Exactly.
makes sense. That makes sense. So it's like that like satisfaction of achieving, like being able to knock something off the list sooner, and then being like, okay, let's go for the next one. Like, let's go for the next one. Um,
Yes,
that's a good
those
idea.
small wins just
Yeah.
like keep that fire going. Because because it does get hard. The debt-free journey looks different for every single person that goes on it. But there's going to be hard sacrifices. Like I had mentioned, my Tahoe, that was a really hard sacrifice for me because
Mhm.
I went from a really nice car to, I mean, my Sequoia is still like to a lot of people a really nice car, but it wasn't my Tahoe.
Right.
It wasn't fully loaded. It didn't, have all the bells and whistles that I loved. And so I felt kind of the pain of like getting rid of that car for this one.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me to deal with, but it was a sacrifice that I would make 10 times over and have no problem now with that sacrifice.
Right.
I absolutely love my Sequoia, but it was hard in the moment because I didn't realize how much value I was placing
Yeah.
in the car I drove because I was totally the poster child of the American belief you are what you drive. And I didn't even realize I was until that moment.
Yeah.
And so, there's going to be hard sacrifices and things that are going to be difficult, but those small wins, like if you can keep building them up, it will keep you going and keep you moving forward. Because, like I said, once the Tahoe was gone, we literally had given ourselves a $450 raise every month, which was amazing.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so before we hit up these last three questions that I have for you, these have been some awesome tips that you've been sharing, and I have been just like devouring your blog and looking all through it, and it's really, really awesome, the tips that you provide, but you also offer help, and so I want to give you an opportunity to share where people can find you, where they can connect with you and get support and really see like how this looks in real life, and if they need help can contact you.
They can contact me through my blog at jessifearon.com, but they can also go to jessifearon.com/backslash it takes a village, and they will be able to get my debt-free printable pack. It's like it has like where you can list out like teaches you like the debt snowball and like you can make your budget there. It kind of just breaks it down for them. So that way you can use that to get started on it. And of course, you can always just send me an email at jessifearon.com, and I'm happy to take any and all questions.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. Make sure you go and check out Jessi Fearon's printable pack for us. It is at Jessi, Jessi, Fearon, FEARON.com / it takes a village. Check those out. I hope they're super helpful to you. I've already looked at them and they look awesome. And as always, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope to catch you next time.